IMDb. How many of you are familiar with IMDb database? Heard of IMDb? Okay. So this is a very large movie database. I use it for a lot of projects in my courses. It has all the movie information, all the TV shows information for the entire world from 1925 onwards. So you can look up your favorite actor, actress. You can look up how many movies they have done, what kind of movies they have done, what kind of genre. So it's a very rich database that is very versatile, and we use it a lot because people can relate to it. People can understand some of the things because they are familiar with it. So what I ask them to do is to, take their favorite actors or actresses and find out how many movies they have made in their life career, and how many movies per year, and what kind of movies. So it gives them motivation to work on that. Similarly, how many of you have heard of the DBLP database? Movies, everyone is interested. DBLP, nobody is interested. So DBLP is a database of publications. So if you want to look up who has published how many papers in computer science, primarily it's for computer science, you just put DBLP and the person's name, and it will bring up all the publications of that particular professor. So you want to look up your professor's publication list, or somebody else their publications list, this is the place you want to go to. And it's a very useful database because both of these have a lot of structural relationship. And that is why they are good. Just like Facebook and LinkedIn, these are different sets of databases that have structural information. So graph model is appropriate for doing it. But the graph models we saw, simple and attributed, are not very good for that. So this is the plethora of databases. Are simple and attributed graphs sufficient for modeling and analysis of this data? The answer is they are very difficult. And we will try to establish that. So what is the challenge here? We want to analyze large multi-entity. So remember, we talked about entity. Those of you who know ER know what an entity is. It can be anything. Features or attributes of an entity, and relationships are the relationship between entities. So you may have multiple relationships among the same type of entities. For example, you have one relationship in Facebook, a different relationship in Twitter, a third relationship in LinkedIn for the same people. So you may want to ask, who are the most popular or socially active group of people across 2 platforms, or across 3 platforms, or across 3 social networks, all of them, or one of them. Or you may ask, who are the most influential set of people in a subset. So how do you model this? Another example is airlines. You have multiple airlines. Their routes are not the same. Some of them overlap, some of them do not overlap. So we have used some American Airlines, and we have used some Indian Airlines for analysis. So you want to identify hubs, some of which we saw yesterday. Can we predict upcoming hubs? So we think that to model these kind of data sets with this characteristic, same type of entities, we think multi-layer networks, which we call homogeneous multi-layer networks, are useful. So what are homogeneous multi-layer networks? Okay. So that's one category. The second category is you have multiple relationships, but among different types of entities, not the same types of entities. It is different from Facebook and LinkedIn. What are the examples? IMDb is a very good example. We have movies as an entity, we have actors as an entity, we have directors as an entity, we have genres as attributes, ratings. So if you want to find out for the most popular actor groups from each movie rating class, which are the director groups with which they have maximum interaction. Now, this is not a straightforward query. You cannot write a query for this one. So that's what you need to understand. That is why this comes to the analysis part, where you have to figure out how to generate this analysis based on the semantics and the relationship between them. So even though this particular data set is, we have loaded it in an Oracle database. So what I ask the students to do is to write some queries, not this kind of query, but a different kind of query, and also do the same thing using MapReduce to understand what is the difference between writing an SQL query, writing a MapReduce code, and the scalability issue. Highly rated actors working in similar genres who have never acted together. So these are not easy to answer. Similarly, there are other data sets like DBLP, where you have authors, you have publications, you have conferences, and authors collaborate. Authors publish in some publications and in some conferences. So frequently publishing cohesive co-author groups. How do you identify them? Most active periods for popular collaborators. So I'll show you some. These are the things I give as my class projects. So that will bring out, one of the students, she did a great job. I'm going to present her work in the next hour. So this can be modeled using what we call heterogeneous multilayer network, in contrast to the homogeneous multilayer networks I talked about. So that brings us to the question of what is a multilayer network we are talking about. So in addition to simple unattributed graphs we saw yesterday, we claim that multilayer networks, or MLNs for short, are needed for complex data modeling and analysis. First, let us understand what multilayer networks are and how they are different from the other two types of graphs. Are they also suited for analysis? So modeling is different from analysis. As I said yesterday, you can create a relational database, but if there is no querying or if there is no overlap on that, that database is useless. So modeling is different. Modeling allows you to understand the application data set clearly. Analysis is what allows you to derive inferences and knowledge from that data set. So these two are two different things. Whatever model we use should be good as a model, should also be good for analysis. So what is a multilayer network? It is a set of simple graphs termed layers or networks. That is where the name comes from. And the differences are that semantics of the layer can be determined by the modeler. So somebody is modeling the database, somebody understands the application area, somebody understands the domain. So again, domain knowledge is important. So you can say director directs an actor. So that's a relationship. Every actor who acts in a movie is directed by a director. Actors can have acted together in a movie. So in a movie you can see who are all the actors who have worked together, co-actors. Authors have collaborated on a paper. There are papers by a single author, there are papers by multiple authors. So that is collaboration. Choice of layer semantics based on objectives. Nodes between two layers can also be connected. Directs is a relationship between actor and director. Co-author relationship is between nodes of the same layer. So let us take this example and see how we can model this. So we cannot certainly model it a simple graph, right? But we can model it as a separate simple graph. So this one is modeled as 3 layers. One layer for Facebook. You can read it perhaps from this angle. Facebook friends, LinkedIn connection, and call network. So this is a multiple set of graphs. So you can say, what is the difference? The difference is that we are going to do the analysis on all the 3 graphs together, or some subset of the graphs together instead of a single graph. So this is a homogeneous multi-layer network. Homogeneous because the nodes are the same in all the 3. You see the same number of nodes are there, the same type of nodes are there. It is people. But the relationships are different. They are not the same. Somebody who is on LinkedIn may not be on Facebook. For example, I'm not on Facebook. I don't use Facebook. But I'm on LinkedIn just for the sake of presence. I don't use Twitter. It's too much of waste of time for me. So this is a multi-layer network. In addition, this is a homogeneous multi-layer network. Now, when we want to model other data sets which have multiple types, we cannot do it with this one because one layer will have one data set, another layer will have another type. So for that, we still use layers, but we also allow edges between layers. So one layer is actors, another layer is directors, third layer is movies. And this says this movie is directed by this director, this actor is directed by this director. So we can capture not only the information within the layer, we can also capture information across layers, relationships across layers. Now the question is, can we analyze this as a whole? Because you cannot just analyze this layer, then the connection to the other layer is lost. So this is what we call a heterogeneous. Heterogeneous meaning each layer has a different type of entity. Homogeneous means each layer has the same type of entity. Now once we have heterogeneous and homogeneous, you can also think of hybrid. Hybrid multi-layer networks where some layers are homogeneous, other layers are heterogeneous. There are links from some layers to another layer, but not to every layer. So there are 3 types of multi-layer networks: homogeneous, heterogeneous, and hybrid. So the question is, does this representation provide more clarity? Modeling clarity using MLNs, combination of the 2 choice of layers depending upon the set. So here the modeler has a lot of flexibility in determining how to define each layer. Also has the flexibility which layers should be connected depending upon the semantics, which layers are not connected. So this flexibility is very useful for modeling different types of data sets. Without that flexibility, it's very difficult to model, or the model will not be as good. So here, interactions among IMDb entities for the co-actor groups who are friends on Facebook, which are the director groups with which they have maximum. So you can now ask questions combining Facebook data and IMDb data, which is not very easy to do otherwise. So because actors and directors are people, they also have a presence on Facebook. They also may have a presence on LinkedIn. So you can bring these 2 application areas and ask questions that cut across these 2 applications, which are extremely difficult to do otherwise. So here is an example of a hybrid MLN where This is a homogeneous layer. There are no connections from this, and these two are heterogeneous layers, but I should be able to analyze either these two layers, or these two layers, or these two layers, or all three layers. So that is the power of multi-layer network modeling and the capability. We'll come to the analysis part a little bit later. So this is a combination of HOMLN and HEMLN. Any questions, comments? I just hope that you are getting something out of this material, may be totally new, and it will take some time to sink. It's not easy to absorb all this in a very short period of time. So modeling clarity, layer is a simple graph, so we know that. It captures the semantics of a subset of features of the same entity type through intra-layer edges. So we differentiate between intra-layer edges, that is layers, edges within a layer, and interlayer edges, edges across two layers. For HOMLN, interlayer edges are not shown because the entity sets are the same. So you assume that every node has an edge or has an implicit edge from one layer to another layer. What are the benefits of MLNs? Increased clarity and understanding. It is less convoluted because you can also do it using attributed graphs, but attributed graphs become very complex. You have different colored nodes, you have different colored relationships, and it becomes very difficult to understand. Existing single graph, this is very important. You can use existing single graph algorithms for analyzing multi-layer network. This is a big advantage or a big benefit because you don't have to develop all the algorithm from scratch, but you still have to develop some portions of it. Layers can be processed in parallel. This is a very huge advantage. So if I have 3 layers, and if I want to find communities in each layer, I can do it in parallel. So scalability kind of is built into this model. Partitioning of graphs and scalability is built into this model, which is not the case for the other models. Elegant handling of dataset updates. Why is this true? Because remember, all these datasets are changing. They're not static. Every year new movie information is added. Every year new publication information is added. People are joining Facebook and leaving Facebook every so often. Now, if updates need to be done, you have to do it only for one layer. Any changes to Facebook affects one layer, not other layers, which means whatever analysis I have done for the other two need not be repeated. This is a big advantage from the computation perspective, that you can reuse previously performed analysis and computations, and you don't have to redo them. So this is what I showed you yesterday. I think here I'm just going to add. So now we have 3 different types of graph models: single graph, attributed graph, multi-layer networks, and we are comparing it with modeling clarity, analysis availability, computational efficiency, drill down and visualization. We are claiming this is good for all of these, and some of the claim comes from one of the approaches we have developed called the decoupling approach for analysis, which is very, very, very efficient. We will try to show that a little bit in this one. So what is the current state? Compared to simple graphs, there are not many algorithms developed yet for multi-layer networks. So how can we analyze MLNs? That's a big question, right? If there are no algorithms, then what do you do? Typically, MLNs are collapsed. So what is done in the literature, in the community, is they take all the layers and then collapse it. It's very easy to collapse the layers. You can use Boolean OR, or you can use Boolean AND, depending upon what you want to do. But that results in loss of information. Structural relationship among entities are lost, cannot be maintained. When you merge two edges corresponding to two different relationships, now you cannot distinguish between them. When you merge two entities which are different, you cannot distinguish between an actor and a director. Drill down and visualization become difficult because of the loss of information. A few algorithms exist that are focused on the entire MLN and focus on interlayer edge traversals. This cannot be used for HOMLNs because there are no interlayer edges. Multiple traversal may be needed, making computation very inefficient. So our approach provides a much better way of doing that. So here is one slide on multi-layer network analysis alternative. So this is what I just now described. Perhaps the pictorial representation is easier to understand. Suppose say you have three layers, layer 1, 2, 3. These are homogeneous. Now I can combine or collapse all of them into a single aggregated layer. And then I can analyze this because I have an algorithm for analyzing simple graphs. But the problem is you lose information. The third alternative is to analyze the entire MLN as an MLN. Multi-layer network, you can use random walk-based analysis across MLN. Final result, no partial result. And this is a complex algorithm. And you cannot say, do only 2 layers. Then you have to have a separate algorithm, do 3 layers. You have to have a separate algorithm. So what we have proposed is the middle one. And we call it the decoupling approach, network decoupling approach. This was done by one of my PhD students, and he's fortunately still continuing with our group and doing a lot of research. So what do we do here? How is this different from this and this? Here, we treat all the layers as independent layers. And we do the analysis of each layer separately. So each layer is analyzed separately. So think of, divide and conquer or partitioning approach where you do things on partitions and then combine the result into the whole. So this is what we call the analysis function. So you apply whatever analysis, it may be community detection, it may be centrality detection, it may be substructure, it may be motive. Apply this to each layer separately and then take the output, partial result from layer 1, partial result from layer 2, partial result, and then you compose them. You compose them to get the final result. And this composition is new. This is where we need to develop the composition function or the composition algorithm using the decoupling approach. But this stage remains the same, which is a huge advantage. So you analyze individual layers separately, and then you figure out how to combine so that the result you get here should be the same as the result you get here, or the result you get here. That's important, right? We want to get the same result, but in a slightly different manner, in a more efficient manner, and be able to apply parallel processing techniques for that. This is one of the reasons why we have been able to use MapReduce for multi-layer network analysis, because each layer can become a partition. If you want, you can further partition the graph in each layer if it is very big. I'll show that perhaps tomorrow. So combined results of layers 1, 2, and 3 using this. So we need to have 2 functions. One is the analysis function, which we already have algorithms for, but what we need to develop is the theta, which is the composition function. So what are the limitations of current alternatives? I have already explained that when you reduce it to a single graph, aggregate, combine, process the combined layer using existing algorithms. The problem is this will require exponential. If I have n layers, and if I want to do all the subsets of n layers, there are 2 to the power of n subsets. That means I have to generate 2 to the power n graphs and then analyze them, which is a very, very laborious or computationally expensive process. MLN as a graph process, the MLN as a fold analysis, focuses on the layer edge, and here need to develop algorithms from scratch. See that previously available algorithms cannot be used because they're only for one layer, but you are looking at the entire MLN. Difficult to parallelize and scale. Repeated traversals MSN may be required. So there are a number of disadvantages for the current approaches. That's one of the reasons we try to figure out, is there a better way to do that? And one of the better ways to do that is the decoupling based approach. So what is decoupling based approach? I have already saw that. So it's a divide and conquer approach. Analysis functions, specific partial results are composed systematically to fulfill the objective. So you generate partial result 1. As I said, you can even partition a layer and generate the partial result. Nothing stops you from doing it. We actually do that. If the layer itself is very large, say 1 million nodes and 5 million edges, then you can partition the layer and then generate it. That means you can do parallel processing for each layer. You can do parallel processing across layers. That's what adds much more punch into scalability. And then you compose. So this is a binary composition. So we compose 2 layers at a time and then take the results of the 2 layers and compose it further. You can apply it any number of times for any number of layers and you get the complete result. So this is what we call the decoupling approach, and this is a very powerful way. I'll show you some examples. So identify theta for various types of psi. Psi is known, theta is not known. So that is the challenge. Communities, we have done all of these. Communities for HOML and HML. Centralities, node, betweenness, closeness that I explained yesterday. We have done that for both HOML and HML. I have a PhD student working on weighted graphs now. So I am not even talking about weighted graphs here in this course, but that's another area where there is a lot of work and interest and need is there. Frequent substructures, I'll show you some demos tomorrow, motifs, and we have done a lot of work in graph creating. Establish their correctness, that's very important. So just like what we do in mining, any kind of analysis, establishing the correctness of your algorithm, your approach. Oops. Okay, I think I'm getting the hang of this. Oops. What happened? Power outage? Okay. Establish their correctness with respect to ground truth. So remember I mentioned ground truth, and in this case we use the first approach as the ground truth, collapse everything, find the answer, and that is what we consider as the ground truth. Oh, this is not moving. Okay, establish their properties. So we have all kinds of properties like commutativity, associativity, distributivity. These are also important to understand, not just the algorithms, and develop efficient algorithms. And there is flexibility of analysis compared to traditional approach. The advantage is existing algorithms for a monoplex can be used directly. Combinations are easy to analyze. I can take just 2 layers because of the decomposition. I can just analyze 2 layers and split it. If I want 3, I already have the analysis for 2 layers, add the third analysis, and then compose it. The negatives are no need to generate, store, analyze each attribute feature combination. We don't have to generate and store as in the first case. If you have n attributes, you have exponential combinations. We don't have to do that. Instead, MLNs generate, keep, and compute only n layers. So we have reduced a exponential problem to a linear problem. That's a very huge advantage. Exponential is computationally very difficult, linear is very easy. Composition allows this approach to compute selective subset of attributes, linearizes exponential complexity. Benefits, we retain the MLN modeling clarity it brings and semantic. That means we don't merge anything, we don't coalesce anything, we don't put two different entities as one entity. We keep them separate. So structure and layer semantics are preserved. Leverage single graph algorithms. As I said yesterday, we use Infomap, we use Louvain for community, we use Subdue for substructure detection, we use different centrality algorithms for that. Structure preservation, no loss of information, no distortion, efficiency, exponential combination of graph reduced to linear combinations, flexibility. I can choose any number of subsets, number of layers to analyze. I want to analyze Facebook and LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter, or LinkedIn and Twitter, which is difficult to do in the other approach. Amenable to optimizations. I'll show where we can optimize Boolean expressions by using the theorems that we already have. Parallelization opportunities, ease of dataset updates that I already mentioned. Most importantly, this approach is application independent. It doesn't matter what application area you are analyzing, you don't have to worry about it. You just have to worry about the semantics of the layers while creating the semantics, and then you have to translate the objectives into corresponding computations on the layers. But the composition algorithm doesn't change. It is developed once and used. Same as single layer algorithm, communities are the same, whether it comes from a chemical domain or a biological domain or from Twitter domain. A community is a community. So, I don't know, I think she's going to come and stop me soon, but I still have a lot of steps to go. So, some results. So, we use Boolean and our composition. We have done it for HOMLN and HMLN. So if I cannot show all of them, I'll show some partial. So this is for community detection. We have done it on various kinds of data sets from different domains. Real world data set, DBLP and IMDb are real world data sets, and UK accident is a real world data set. We use RMAT. Remember I talked about synthetic data sets and why we generate synthetic data sets. So we have used RMAT and generated. So this gives you some idea of number of vertices, number of edges in layer 1, number of edges in layer 2, and number of edges in layer 3. So we have used 3 layers. I will show you a Facebook example where we have generated 11 layers. Look at this. This IMDb dataset has 13 million edges. That's a reasonably large dataset. Others have 235,000, 230,000, and so on. This one. So, what is AND composition? What is AND composition? Single graph approach for communities. We call it C, single graph, and combine the required layers using AND operator. So for example, let's say this is a layer and this is another layer. These are HOMLN. And I am going to combine these two using AND, meaning so remember the nodes are same. If there is an edge in this layer and an edge in this layer, then there will be an edge in the AND layer. For example, 1, 5, 1, 5 comes out as a layer. There are some edges are not there. So something is missing. Okay. So these are the two layers, and this is the AND graph. So if I AND these two graphs, I get this graph. I get this graph. That is the AND, Boolean AND of layer 1 and layer 2. Now I will find communities in that layer, and that is what I need to get for these two layers using the decomposition approach. So this is the ground truth. And the communities here are what is shown in highlighted area. There are multiple communities. So for example, this is a community, this is a community, this is a community, so on. And so specification is, what I want to do is to first take a single graph approach to GIAN. Now G1 and G2 and GTN layers. Now GA is the original MLA layer or not layer. Communities are used as the ground truth. Most socially active groups of people across these two platforms. So this is what I want to do. I want to get this from applying my decomposition algorithm on these two layers using the composition function. So correctness is based upon the this one approaches for two layers. So we developed two different algorithms which we called CV AND and CE AND. So this is AND aggregation. CV is a community detection based upon vertices or node based intersection. CEN is an edge based intersection for computing the community. What we'll see that this algorithm is not as accurate as the edge based algorithm, and edge based algorithm takes little more time than the vertex based algorithm. So again, always in computer science we have time versus complexity trade-off, accuracy versus time, accuracy versus memory, and so on. So here are the approaches. So I take communities of layer 1. These are the communities that come out of layer 1. These are the communities that come out of layer 2. And in the CE and algorithm, I am going to intersect the edges of these communities, this with all of them, this with all of them, and then I generate the result. Now that result should be the same as the ground truth. So I think you guys are using some earlier slides. There is some information missing here. Okay. Okay. So I hope you understand it. So the decoupling approach says that this is the psi. Find communities for this graph. Find communities for this graph. The composition is the intersection of these communities from each layer, and then get the result. So this should be the result. Now you can go and check whether this result is close to this result. That's what we want. So how do we analyze the cost? Cost of doing decoupling approach versus cost of doing the ground truth approach. Total decoupling approach cost is one-time cost of layer analysis plus the cost of combining partial results. One-time cost is one community, set of layer-wise communities generated once using existing algorithm, and if you do it in parallel, time is bound by the largest graph or the densest graph which has the highest number of edges. That determines the total time. Cost of combining the results. CV AND algorithm of composition uses one scan of community nodes per required layer, C and 1 scan of community edges per required layer. So remember, always the number of nodes is less than the number of edges, typically. So CE and does little more, take a little more time in its computation, but gives better results. So the total cost is the max partial result combination cost, which is less than the minimum one community cost. This is what we'll show. Cost of ground truth, cost of generate end layers plus cost of retaining communities, and cost of CV and we have shown is less than the cost of CSGN, and cost of CN is less than the cost of. So both costs are way less than the ground truth, cost benefit amortized over large graph analysis. So again, developing an algorithm is one thing. Testing it, you cannot just test it on one data set and say it gives you good results. Maybe it's an outlier. Maybe you just lucked out. You have to test it consistently on several different data sets to make sure the result is consistent across data sets, across characteristics. So as I said, we have experimental results for, I'm going to show you 5,000 accidents from UK from 2014. So layers, 2 nodes are connected if accidents occur within 10 miles of each other and had similar light or weather or road surface condition. Now this 10 miles is what we have chosen. You can do it for 5 miles, you can use it for 1 mile. It's a similarity condition. 4 and composition analysis. So we have generated different, 1 layer for light, 1 layer for weather, 1 layer for road, and we can analyze these two, these two, these two, these two, and all of them, light, weather, and so 3 layers, 3 pairwise analysis, 1 all 3 analysis. Community detection algorithm used is InfoMap, accuracy metrics, normalized mutual information NMI, or you can also use modified NMI, which is slightly better because it takes network topology into account, whereas the first one doesn't take the network topology into account. Oops. Okay, here comes the result, proof of the pudding. So, accuracy. So this is accuracy with respect to the ground truth. If it is the same as ground truth, it is 1, otherwise it is less than 1. So you can see that for CV and the accuracy is less than for CE and. Both NMI and MNMI show similar values. So this shows that one composition algorithm is better than the other algorithm in terms of accuracy. When you look at the efficiency, this is the ground truth cost. This is the cost incurred by CV and. This is the cost incurred by CE and. So you can see that the cost of CV and is much better than the cost of CV and. So there is 71% improvement to the ground truth, whereas this only has 20%, but this gives close to 1 accuracy, this gives less than 1 accuracy. So this is the trade-off that you have to understand and deal with. So trade-off is higher the accuracy, lower is the efficiency. CVN and CN clicks in general CN for accuracy and efficiency. So also, I should point out, we talk about visualization, drill down. It's important to show it in a way that is easy to understand. Just don't dump numbers so that, and then let the viewer figure out what it is and confuse the user so that you can hide behind the numbers. So don't do that. Here is component cost analysis of decoupling approach of CVN and CN. So here we have taken the lowest analysis cost and the highest composition cost. Just to contrast, the lowest analysis cost and the highest counted, and you can see there's a difference of 99% for CVN and a difference of 50% for CEN. So even CEN, which gives good accuracy, is 100 times better than or half of the other one. So worst case analysis, maximum cost of combining the partial result is significantly less than the minimum cost of detect one layer communities. This is the two extremes. We have taken the maximum of what we do and the minimum of what we do on the others, and look at this one. If you take the maximum of this and minimum of that, it will be even more. Trade-off between efficiency and accuracy. So here, these were for the UK accident dataset. These are for the IMDb database. You can see similar results. In this case, CVN performs much worse than CEN. Here it is 0.4, this one is close to 1. Same with this one. Here it is 89% and here is 80%. So this one is very good, even though a little bit more than CVN, it's not very much more, but the accuracy is way higher. This is the accident data set that I showed you and the efficiency. So trade-off higher accuracy, same thing. This is DBLP data set. See the difference, how it varies. The accuracy here is quite high for CVN and even better for CEN. These percentages vary. And this is for RMAT, synthetic data. Again, you can see that CVN gives better. Now why is this? Why is that different data sets give different types of accuracy, different values of accuracy? It's not the same, but the trend is the same. CVN always gives lower accuracy, CEN always gives higher accuracy, response time trend is the same. So this is what is very important to understand. This depends upon the graph characteristics. One graph may be very dense, one graph may have too many edges, one graph may not have it, connectivity is different. So all of these things come into picture to understand what is happening. So that is why it is not enough to do one experiment and say, I'm done, everything is fine, I can go home. Give me my PhD, I'll go home. Okay? So component cost analysis again for different data sets, and you can see that it's very similar. And so you can do complex composition. So I just showed you L1 and L2, but we can do L1 and not L2 and L3 or L4. We can do any Boolean expression. Right? Now we have 4 layers, L1, L2, L3, L4. The approach is the same, composition is the same. So you do community detection for L1, L2 is the complement of L2. Take the complement graph instead of the original graph. So you can always create the complement graph, means fill the edges that are missing from the other graph. And then do the same composition in exactly the same way. So this is not just limited to one particular pair-wise combination. You can apply any Boolean expression you want. In the next lecture, I'll show you some good examples of this. We can also do R composition. The composition algorithm is different. Analysis algorithm is still the same. So I'm not going to give you the algorithm. I'm going to just show you some results for IMDb. Now, similar results are obtained for accuracy and efficiency. Similar results are obtained for RMAT, for accident database, and component cost comparison. So for R, the algorithm is more complicated. So again, the challenge is in developing these composition algorithms so that you get the highest accuracy possible. The goal is to obtain accuracy of 1. Efficiency improves with more analysis. Decoupling approach is amenable to optimization. So for example, if you are given an expression such as this, so this is a Boolean expression, right? We have and, not, and or. We can convert using De Morgan's law. I hope you guys remember what De Morgan's law is. In circuit theory, that's very important, and distribution laws. And then you can convert it into a different expression which is easier to process, which is easier to analyze. So if you analyze this expression as is, it will take more time, less efficient than if you analyze this expression. So optimization of expressions can be done because we already have laws, De Morgan's laws, to convert into conjunctive normal form or into distinctive normal form. So this shows why this optimization is better, and then here are some results for that. Perform cost analysis of all possible specification alternatives for Boolean comparison. Reduce number of comparisons. Start with AND. The reason you start with AND is the AND graph is smaller than the R graph because the number of edges in the AND graph is less than the number of edges in the R graph. Reduce not composition. So depending upon the initial graph, that's what I said. If you know the graph correct, if the initial graph is very dense, complement is very sparse. So it's worthwhile doing the complement first. If the original graph is not very dense, then you want to do it at a later stage. So here we are just showing that we have done for different data sets. This is the Facebook. I'm not going to show it today now. I'm going to show it in the next one. So in the Facebook, we have 11 layers. Age layer, gender, relationship, political views, locale. There are 5 social traits called the Big 5. Conscientiousness, I don't fully remember, I'll show you what they are, and we can analyze all of them. You can see that this is actual Facebook data from Sweden, and they had the data set, so we collaborated with them. You can see that even the number of nodes is very small, number of ledgers are very large, in millions. Potential actor collaborations. Surprisingly, our ma'am has not come to ask me to stop, so I'll continue. So this is interesting because this is something you can relate to. Which highly rated actors work in similar genres? So genre is comedy or horror or sci-fi. Here she comes. I was wondering. But have not co-acted together in any movie. And you can express this analysis using a Boolean expression, not co-acting and genre and average rating. And if you do that, these are the results we got. These are actual names of the actors. If you know them, you can relate to that. You can relate to that and see, and these are the genres. These people typically act in action crime. These people act in drama. Tom Hanks, perhaps you know, Russell Crowe, you know, Kate Winslet, who did the Titanic, you know, Johnny Depp, maybe Tom Cruise for sure, DiCaprio. So you can see the names and who satisfy this objective. So this is the power of analysis or inferring meaningful knowledge from the data set. If you want to figure this out, I mean, IMDb data set is very large. The relational version has, some of the relations has 50 million rows. So reports in 2017 talks of casting Johnny Depp and Tom Cruise in pivotal roles in Universal title Dark Universe. I don't think that happened, but so that confirms that these people did not work together. So somebody is considering, hey, these are very popular actors. If I put them together, perhaps my box office revenue will be higher. Similarly, widely accepted collaborators, which collaboration groups has published in both highly ranked conferences but have never published in either Medium or this one. Again, these are names of people. Some of them you may recognize. For example, Surjit Chowdhury works for Microsoft. Who else you may know? He works for Arizona State, he works for Santa Barbara. So some of these are known names. So he won the VLDB 10-year Best Paper Award. This is from internet. This is to validate our results, whether we are getting the correct results. How do you validate it from an independent source? So he got it, and we Best Paper Award, where Nicholas Bruno, apart from winning ACM Sigma Contributions Award. So this guy has 24,000 citations in Google Scholar and so on. So we do the analysis and then we check whether this analysis is correct. Today it's a little bit easier to do it because of Google and all the information that is available in Google Scholar and H index, I index, all those things come into picture. Okay, I think, do you want me to stop here? Where is she?
So just 1 minute, I'll call her.
Huh? Stop, continue.
Sir, they are confirmed.
Huh?
They are confirming.
Stop,
No, sir, they are confirmed.
continue. Okay, I'll be happy, but your tea is delayed. Okay, so homogeneous MLNs are easy to analyze to some extent. We had to develop algorithm for heterogeneous layers, which are much more complicated than homogeneous. Actually, you may be surprised, a lot of this work was.
If you want, you can take a break.
Break?
Yes, sir.
I knew that. I knew it was coming. Okay.
So breakfast will get served in
ठीक है. Okay, good morning still. Let's continue with this one. So we saw some experimental results for homogeneous multilayer network. This one is about heterogeneous, and heterogeneous is a little more complicated because of the interlayer edges between two layers. Okay, so limitations, as we have seen, no structure preserving definition, type independent, projection based. So typically you aggregate these two layers into a single layer and then you compute the communities for that aggregated single graph. So this is what we use as the ground truth, but there is a lot of information. As you can see, the colored nodes have become black. There is no difference between these nodes and these nodes. There is no difference between the relationship within a layer and the relationships across layers. So again, we have used IMDb database with different sizes, directors, actors, movies for doing that. We have also used DBLP GIAN. So we can actually create either homogeneous MLNs or heterogeneous MLNs depending upon what semantics we want to capture from these data sets. So it is not that given a data set, it can be modeled in only one way. That's important to understand. The same data set can be modeled in so many different ways, and each of them will give different semantics and different structure. So some of the analysis that we wanted to perform are these things. I will not go through all of them. And conference-wise, which are most cohesive groups of authors who publish frequently, including types. Now, remember I introduced the notion of bipartite graphs? For heterogeneous composition, we need to use the bipartite graphs. And when you use the bipartite graphs, we are doing different types of matching, maximum weight matching with ties, maximum weight, redundant matching, maximum weight matching. So these are the data that we are going to compute, and there are other things that you can do. So I'll show you just some efficiency results. Again, the efficiency results are very similar. So this is for the execution time in seconds for the actor layer, director layer, and movie layer, because the movie layer with the rating is quite dense, and because it is dense, it takes more time for computing the analysis. And base case, movie, actor, director, movie, so these are the different timings that are there. So the cost of all iterations together is more than an order of magnitude less than the largest one-time cost. So this is being borne out again and again in all of our experiments. So we feel pretty good about the decoupling approach and the composition, because the composition time is very small compared to the analysis time. So this is another objective about potential actor-director collaborations. For the most popular actor groups from each movie rating class, find the director groups with maximum interaction who also make movies with similar ratings, including tests. So some of these objects purposely we have chosen complicated ones so that we can exercise all the complexity that we can use. So for example, this uses movie layer, actor layer, director layer, and movie layer again to finish the cycle. And this is our visualization. As I keep saying, this is generated more or less manually. We get data because there is no tool to generate this kind of things. What this shows is these are the communities within a layer. This is a movie community, these are actor communities, and these are director communities. These links indicate the most popular actor groups. So these are the most popular actor groups and their relationship to movie communities and their relationship to director communities. If there is a blue edge from here to here to here to here, that means those three groups satisfy this particular objective analysis. So that's how you do that. And this can also be represented using the word cloud. So this is one representation, this is another representation where we can put the actual name of the actors for certain communities, not all the names, and then show. So this is one of the groups, and if you are familiar with actors and directors, you can confirm through independent sources that this is correct. Similarly, we have others. So I'm going to wrap this up. Potential actor-director collaborations. So DiCaprio, Mendes, and Swank. So this brings us to the end of this module. We will start with module 10. So we have seen the analysis, the modeling of multi-layer networks for different data sets and the analysis. So what we are going to see in this hour are some case studies. Case studies of the DBLP dataset and case studies of the IMDb dataset to gather or infer different types of information. So the datasets used. So I want to see whether I can show you, maybe if I, will it take me to, okay, this is nice. So this is the IMDb dataset I've been talking about. So if you look at it, it has a lot of zip files. So title basics, title also known as title principles. So these are the data sets that we use. And this is basic information about movies, TV shows and videos, alternative names, principal cast, and so on. And these are the attributes that are there in each of these CSV files. You can either load it into a relational database if you want. I have done it for use for my classwork. You can also use it for the analysis that we are talking about. And then there is a lot of information. This is a publicly available data set which you can download and use. So you should be, if you are interested in that, you can take a look at it. The second data set is the DBLP data set. And as I told you, this is about publications, and what I did was I went to my site. So what all you have to do is to say you have to say DBLP and somebody's name, and it will give you the list of all publications categorized by journal publications, conference publications, and so on for each year, starting from 2025 backwards, all the way. So this is a very highly useful database, and it also gives you a lot of the other information like who we have highly collaborated authors. Then it will show you list of authors who one has collaborated with, and so on and so forth. So this is another data set, and the good thing is you can check for any faculty you want to know what their publication record is, and that is useful. Okay. Okay, so this was given as a class project for one of my courses, and I have chosen to present this because this lady did an extremely good job and really understood the importance of the modeling, importance of the kind of knowledge that can be derived. And since she was a computer science student, she was familiar with a lot of authors. We studied a lot of papers and she could relate to it. I tried to keep her format, so her name is Isra Jalada, and so these are the references she has used. And the objective was to analyze a homogeneous multi-layer network of author collaborations from different conferences. If you are familiar, there are a lot of conferences in computer science. So the problem description is given the DPLP dataset, that is not entire dataset, not just for an individual, analyze 5 complex queries using the following conference. So VLDB is a very highly ranked conference, very large database conference. SIGMOD is another very highly ranked conference. I don't know whether we are familiar with these conferences or not. SIGKDD is a very highly ranked data mining conference. ICDM is a very highly ranked data mining conference. DASPA is a database conference but with medium rank. DAVAC is another database conference with medium rank. So we purposely chose 2 database conferences with high rank, 2 data mining conferences with high rank, and 2 database conferences with medium rank So we wanted to study how authors and collaborations, where they publish, how they publish, and what kind of things they do. So this is the DBLP database. This is her animation. I think she has done a very good job. As a class project, all of this was done within a semester and make a presentation. So collaboration groups is communities. So this is the DBLP authors. And then you have venue. So the attributes that are derived from this are venue, VLDB, Sigma, this one, and then publication date. So she perhaps looked at 2000 data, but you can also look at very large number of data. Then here is the data that is collected for each paper. So this says that authors A, B, and C with this title published on this date in this conference. So this is the publication. So this data has to be extracted from the DBLP database. This is part of pre-processing. So you have the correct attributes that you want to do processing on, and then you want to look at, for example, these people have published in VLDB, these authors have published in Sigma, and then you want to compute communities for these two layers and then see whether there is an intersection. If I want to find communities only in VLDB, I can do it, but if I want to find communities across VLDB and Sigma, then I have to do the CE and composition. So that's where what I discussed earlier comes into picture. So we will usually give them a midway milestone and a final milestone so that they make progress and they feel that they are making progress. Analyze communities in single layers. Final milestone is analyze communities in multiple layers. Step 1, formulate queries or objectives. That is also sometimes not easy. Step 2, combine layers using the appropriate tools. We ask them to go as complex as they can. Step query, query and analyze results. So query 1, find the highly ranked or illegal scope. So this is the English version of what we want to do, and the exist in both VLDB and Sigma top tier conference. Objective expressed in English and try to translate into computations. Okay? So what are the most elite conference collaborative groups? Who are the most elite significant authors in biggest group and this one? Furthermore, should we expect that the most significant authors in the elite conferences to have higher impact in general than the most significant authors in the law? So the conference, every conference and every journal has something called an impact factor. If the impact factor is high, then the conference or the journal is supposed to be of higher quality, and it's much more difficult to publish in those conferences and journal papers. So people want to publish in high impact conferences and journals as much as possible. So approach, so take 2 conferences, for example, VLDB layer. So these layers have to be constructed from the data set. And then you analyze communities for these 2 conferences, and then do the C and approach because this gives better accuracy. Then you have combined, like people who publish both in Sigma and in VLDB. 2 different conferences, the same collaborative groups. So here is the result, biggest elite community VLDB plus Sigma. So this is only one of the communities. This is not all the communities. So she has taken the biggest community because that's of more importance. And as you can see, these communities are not just node names, these are the actual authors. These are the actual authors who have collaborated and published in both conferences. Most collaborative elite group in these two conferences, so one of them, so you can see this is a complete graph. That means these people have collaborated on all the papers they have published in Sigma and VLDB. And then they take this information and they do use Google and others to explore and validate. So it turns out GIAN, who is one of the very strong researchers, and he is in University of Illinois, verified this. So this is from Google, and you can see that this guy, I don't know how many of you are familiar with H-index and I-10 index. So he has citations 162,885. That's a large number of citations. And since 2014, 69, H-index is 164, I-10 index is 750. So this can be verified, and this comes out in it should have come out somewhere here, GIAN and others. Okay, so you can see that this information is not easy to infer, and you cannot write a query to get this information because notion of communities is not possible. Okay, most significant elite scientists, it also comes out to be the same thing. And second, so this is for the highly ranked database conference. The second is to do the same thing for DASFA and DAWAC, which are medium second tier conferences, same set of questions, same analysis, and the test is done using Google Scholar, or validation is done by using Google Scholar. So same approach is this one and take this one, and then these are communities, do the CN and produce the final result. And here is the biggest second tier community. So this is different. This is very different from the other one. So you can see that less number of people, less number of groups are publishing in these conferences. So the goal or the aim is to try and publish in the other conference. And then most collaborative second tier community. So these are the people who are associated with them. And then most collaborative second tier scientist turns out to be this guy from Nanyang University, and you can see that the citations are not the same, still amazing, but lower impact. So this lady was very excited because she knew, or not personally, she knew of these authors. She had read about these papers from these authors, so she was familiar with the work by these people. To find that out through a systematic, principled approach and analysis is very exciting, because you have this data but you don't know. You know them but you don't know how it works out. So most significant, the same person. Query 3 is the same, but this is for ICDM. So I'll go through that. I think the interest is, now the analysis part is more or less the same, but the results are different, because the data sets are different. So here you see that very large community is very active in publishing ICDM and SIG-KDD. Both are very highly ranked data mining conferences. And you can see again the names of people and where they publish. And again, she does the most collaborative LIDM community, and that's what comes out with the names. And then again, the same guy shows up, surprisingly, because he is active both in the database community and in the data mining community. He publishes a lot in both of them. So again, it's the same thing. Significant scientists is the same thing. So now let us go to more complex queries. Find elite collaboration groups in general scope who do not publish in lower ranked conferences. So what we want to see is, are there groups who do not publish in lower ranked conferences only stick to higher ranked conferences. So again, the steps are the same. What are the biggest elite superior collaborator groups? So here the translation is find communities that exist in both VLDB and SIGMOD and do not exist in lower ranked conferences, this one and that one. So again, the complexity of the computation, the formulation of the objective for computation differs. And going from English to this one is non-trivial, right? We are trying to automate this translation. This is a natural language processing problem. So you have an English query, and today we have tools for converting English query to SQL. But we don't have any tools to convert English query to analysis objectives on graphs. We still do not have that, and that is not trivial because SQL is somewhat simpler and it is relatively easy, and we have very good tools who do a very good job, but we are trying to do the same thing for this one. So what is the approach? Now the analysis is much more complex, right? You do it for VLDB and this one, but you take the complement of these two, not published, and then find the communities. Sorry, why is that? Okay. Okay. So this step is very different and much more involved, much more data incentive. So this is VLDB and SIGMOD and not DASPA and not DAWA communities. So again, what you get here is a different community. Perhaps there are a lot of people with the same names, because typically people who are able to publish do not do that. And again, you can analyze. This one is slightly different from the previous one. And then again, most collaborative elite scientist comes out to be the same person, and same again. And then we know that scientists who publish in higher ranked conferences have higher impact on the community in general than scientists who publish. GIAN is one of the most significant data scientists. If higher ranked conferences earn their rank from the impact they have on the community compared to them. I have no better understanding of graph analysis literature, may use this for my future work. So she did her PhD in UTA, and she just graduated this semester. So we also asked some questions. What do you think you learned from this effort? Because this is a class project, we want to understand what kind of things they learned, what is the utility of this project, whether I should give similar projects or change it. So some kind of feedback is very important and useful for us. So what do you think you learned from this project? Graph analysis, do you think there is a paper from this project? So typically I ask this question for them to understand and judge whether the work can be converted into a paper that can be published, if not whether extensions are possible to be published, because as a student this is very important. You know, you need to publish papers, you need to make sure you're in the committee. She says no, but all the tools have already been published. If not, can you extend this to make a paper? I don't know what the answer is. Feedback, many thanks for introducing us to graph analysis, very interesting field that will definitely benefit me in my research. Line on fact finding, many thanks to, he was the TA for this course, most hardworking TA. The course was like a journey to 4 different destinations each future data scientist should visit. Exam was really demanding and scary. So this is the feedback we have. So you are taking your exam tomorrow. tell me whether it is demanding and scary after you take it. Any questions? Any comments? So I think it is not, it's one thing to understand or learn the theory. Many times what I see in the Indian context is they want to learn only theory. They don't want to think about applications. But the hard or the important thing is, theory is fine. You can understand all the theory you want, but if you cannot apply it to a real world problem, to me the theory is almost useless. The proof of the pudding is able to apply your theory to real world problems and solve real world problems. I think there is a lack of that focus in many places, and I urge you not to fall into that trap. Because just learning all the theory and be able to ace your exams doesn't mean anything. The question is, if you encounter this problem in your workplace or somewhere else, will you be able to solve that problem? Will you be able to see the connection between what you have learned and how to apply that? Bridging this gap, I think, is a lot more important than just doing the theory or just being a practitioner. So I try to make my courses very pragmatic. I give them real world problems, real world data sets, large data sets. So they need to understand rather than solving a problem with 300 pieces of data. Anybody can solve that. But when you scale it to 1 million pieces of data, then comes a lot of different challenges that you need to use. She has not listed all the challenges she encountered, only the final results, but you can see that this data is very large. Okay, so keep that in mind for that. Okay, so this is another one. So this may be somewhat similar to, so here what we did was, instead of analyzing the entire data set, we extracted top 500 actors. Now we have this in a Oracle database, IMDb dataset. We can write an SQL query and then extract information from that, which we can use for further analysis. Similarly, we extracted DBLP co-author information from 2003 to 2007. As I said, we also worked on a different data set, which was a Facebook data set based upon psychometric tests and Facebook profile in period 2007 to 2012, 5 years worth of actual Facebook data from Sweden. So again, the reason we were very interested in this was we were able to generate 11 layers. Once the number of layers increase, the processing complexity becomes very large. It's one thing to play with 2 layers and 3 layers. It's another thing to play with 11 layers and then get some computational results. So how do the personality traits evolve with age? So social sciences have identified 5 personality traits. And this is from social science. We wanted to see whether what is done in the social science matches with what we see on Facebook. So first trait is openness. It reflects one's preference for new experiences and to engage in self-examination. So if you have this property, then it is you are considered open-minded or openness. Now for all of this, there was some additional information that was also gathered in terms of surveys and other things. So here is what we found, and this was done with respect to age. So we take the layer for age, layer for openness, and then we compute the community for that. So this is very interesting to aggregate. So this is the blue one. So openness is the blue one. Increases with age and peaks around 30. 54.2, group of 31 to 40. So that is this one. Older people prefer to go with the tried and tested approach. 67 point were the above 60 years old resist. So this curve shows that people in the younger age group up to 40 are more open compared to the people in the other age group. And this is also something borne out by the social scientists, for example. Okay, so this has all the curves. We'll discuss each of them separately. Now, conscientiousness, CON, associated with achievement and working systematically, methodically, and purposefully. So that is corresponds to this one. Analysis shows that the age group with most consciousness is in 41 to 50-year-old. This red curve. Recent survey, average age of founders and entrepreneurs is 45 years. So this is our cross-validation. Cross-validation, so consciousness, this matches this one and then it declines, and there is a steady rise of this one till the age of 51. The third trait is the extraversion. Describes one's social ability, one's sociability, and enjoy to be the center of attention. So which age group exhibits more extraversion compared to other age groups seems to peak at two age groups. So here is the green one. It seems to peak at here, and it also seems to peak here. In between it has changes in the data set. So kind of this is what we call population analysis, or this can also be done with census data in various ways, depending on what attributes you have collected and what attributes you have. So this is very interesting to understand the traits with respect to age groups. Agreeableness reflects a tendency to perceive others in a more positive light. And this comes from this color. Where is that color? This one is parenthood and grandparenthood may make the elder generation more empathetic towards others as compared to the younger ones. So this color is this one. So you can see that this one dips here and then increases steadily as the age increases. Neuroticism reflects one's ability to deal with emotionish states such as stress and anxiety. There is a lot of concern about this today with the younger generation or Gen Z because of the addiction to mobile devices, the amount of time they spend on mobile devices, the lack of interaction with real humans. So they seem to be more comfortable with devices, gadgets, and robots, and they don't know how to interact with human beings. So there is a lot of discussion in the social science circles as to whether this is good or bad, what to do. I don't know, you might have heard recently Australia has taken a step to ban social media, and there are a lot of for and against opinions about that. We don't know how or where it will lead to. I don't know how it is in India, but in the US there is some age group below which you cannot take mobile phones to school, and after that in many schools you have to put your mobile phone while you are in school. It will be under lock and key and you get it. So it is still not clear as to what is good and what is not good. I don't know what the situation in India is. When my son was growing up, a lot of these issues were not there because these technology were not there at that time. So I'm not fully aware of that. So neuroticism curve looks like this one. Study around 80 to 90% adolescent suicides are linked to common psychiatric disorders such as depression and anxiety. This much study might have done in 2009. To me, it appears like this may be still true in a lot of younger generation. Trait NU seems to be more stable over age compared to other traits. So that is this curve which goes. So some of this information has to be derived from analysis. So the question is, how do you do this kind of analysis? What tools are appropriate for this kind of analysis? What models that you have to use for this analysis? And what kind of computations you use? It is not that this is the only way to do this. There may be other ways of doing so. Social scientists perhaps are doing it based upon surveys and intuition and other things. But you can cross-verify that with large amounts of data set and see whether that is still true in the current population. Any questions on this one? I think that is the last one. Oh. Okay, last one is the privacy concern. How does individual age correlate with their comfort level of sharing personal information on social media? Now, this is a very important aspect, right? We know today that anything you put on the internet or social media is going to exist forever. But still, what surprises me to a lot of times is people put a lot of personal information on social media, on internet. Why they do it, I don't know. Maybe they do not understand the consequences of that or serious number, but with now AI generated things, it is going to get even worse. So this is a very important concern. How much information, how much of your personal information you want to make it public for everyone, because that may be misused, that may be abused. So here is what we gathered from the data set. So you can see that low privacy concern, high privacy concern. So people in the age group under 20 have much higher privacy concern, whereas when you move toward this one, people in this age group have a very low privacy concern. Maybe this is partly because they do not understand the impact of the technology. They don't understand the consequences of what can happen with this, so just publish it because they don't know. They're ignorant about a lot of things because of which their privacy concern is low. But this gives a window into what is happening with different age groups and what kind of privacy concerns they have. So people less than 40 years prefer higher level of privacy, more aware of the cons of sharing sensitive personal information on the web, such as identity theft. Status updates of people greater than 40 contain more personal information, and this trend increases with age, reflects a lower level of privacy concern, probably due to unawareness of the potential harm from disseminating personal information on social media. So that's what this reflects. Okay. So we have, so this last set is to analyze, this is somewhat similar to some of the analysis we saw for airlines, but it is done from a different viewpoint. And this uses degree and closeness rather than community, for example. So, 6 airline websites were crawled to extract non-stop flights that fly between US cities. So we have a lot of airlines, as you know. American, Delta are larger airlines. Others are smaller airlines, Spirit, Allegiant, Frontier, Southwest. So this doesn't include United. I'm not sure why, but so this crawling websites is also not very easy because the websites keep changing their format, layout, and other information. So the same set of 214 US cities were represented through nodes in each layer. Edges 2 cities are connected by an unweighted and undirected edge in the ith layer if there is a direct flight between them. So layer 1 was American Airlines with so many edges, that means so many flights. Delta, this many. Other Southwest, you can see these two are large number of edges. Allegiant Airlines, Frontier, and Spirit have less number of edges. They are smaller. I mean, we don't know that you use the data set, you are not given the airlines, you are just given the data set for each airline. So the analysis requirements are which are the most important cities per airline carrier. This is relatively easy to do. For each layer, you just find the top 3 hubs or top 4 hubs, and they correspond to the important cities. Can the airlines be separated into major and minor airlines? So this is little bit of a prediction. This is not straightforward. So how do you do that? Given an airline carrier recommend the next city for its expansion, which is similar to what we did earlier. So most important cities, higher the degree of a node, more is the number of flights, higher is the closeness centrality of a node, faster it is to travel. So this is important. If you want to book a flight with least amount of stopovers or with the shortest distance, then you have to look for closeness, not just the degree, right? Because that will have the less number of stops. Remember, a closeness node is one that has the shortest distance from that point to every other point in the graph. So that's important. So faster it is to travel from any city in terms of the number of intermediate flights or the number of hops. So when this was analyzed, this is what came out for American, Delta, and Southwest. Now you can see that there is a lot of overlap, right? Here, Salt Lake City appears in Delta, not this one. Chicago appears here and here. So there are some, Las Vegas. So there are some overlaps, not a lot of overlaps. Closeness centrality hub. So this is the degree centrality. This is the closeness centrality. So these are not the same. The closeness centrality gives a different aspect of the graph, not the degree. So these are the ones that are considered for hubs. These are the ones that can be used for minimum number of intermediate stops or stopovers for your flight. Similarly, for these 3 airlines, same thing, Orlando, Las Vegas, Tampa, ordered in terms of the hub degree value, ordered in terms of the centrality value, same thing for Frontier, same thing for Spirit. Degree and closeness centrality measures are able to figure out the airline-wise important cities in terms of maximizing neighborhood connectivity and minimizing overall travel across US cities respectively. So why is this important? This is important because you need to translate the requirement into the appropriate computation. If you don't understand the difference between degree centrality and closeness centrality, you will not be able to do it. Or if you don't understand the difference between betweenness centrality and others, you may not be able to do that, or you may use the wrong way. So categorizing airlines. So one way to do that is based on the edge density of a layer. An airline was categorized into major or minor. So major based upon the edge density. So why is edge density relevant for categorizing major or minor airlines? Why do you think? Because this is something that is not part of the objective. This is something that somebody has to translate. This is what makes the automated translation of an objective into computation very difficult, because you have to make that connection. You have to make that connection that edge density is related to this and why. Anybody has an idea? So if you think about it, if something is a major airlines, that has more number of flights. More number of flights. A smaller airline is likely to have less number of flights. So that translates to edges. But density is used for normalizing. If you have very large number of nodes and large number of edges, small number of nodes, small number of edges, the density is the same. So that doesn't tell you. But in this case, we know that the number of nodes is the same. We are using the same 214 cities. If the edges are more, that means there are more flights from those airlines for that, and that will indicate that it is a bigger airline or a major airline, whatever way you want to think about it. So this mapping, this translation of objectives to computations is perhaps the most difficult part of an analyst's work. Because this is in this domain. If you go to a different domain, it may be something very different. So you need to understand the domain. You need to understand the domain. You need to understand the operations that you have, operators that you have, and see which sometimes there may not be an operator to do what you want. You need to understand and realize, so say, hey, this is not possible to compute from what I have. Otherwise, you will compute something and give it, which may or may not be the correct one. So based on the edge density of a layer, an airline was categorized into major and minor airline, American Southwest Delta. Now you can also validate it, verify the categorization using the fleet size and annual revenue information. This is what I called validation and sanity check, right? So you can see here, American has 950 fleets, 950 aircrafts. This is as of today. Southwest has 857, 718, whereas these are in the hundreds. Look at the revenue. These are in 40 billion, 40, 20, 41. These are in 1.4 and 2.6. So clearly, the measure that we applied for categorizing seems to be correct. Okay, so that is very important, cross-validation and making sure this is from independent sources. This information is not given to you. This information is extracted from the web and checked after the computation. So thus edge density has a positive correlation with these parameters, and that is one way to think about it. Promising cities for business. Business types vary from city to city. For each category, heuristics were used to estimate the cities that will be hubs in the three-layer and composition. So we took the tier 1 cities that are hubs of major airlines, hubs of minor airlines. So, so these are the common cities for tier 1. Good place to invest in restaurants, advertisement and brand enhancement. People have good spending power. Large scale business can consider new headquarters here as easy. More availability of manpower, large audience size for business job. So this is very important, just to give you an example. Boeing, its headquarters was in Seattle. That's where they started, that's where, at some point, they decided to change their headquarters. So the question is, which city within the US should they choose? So they have to go through an analysis like this. What are the cities that meet their requirements? So this was almost a 1 year worth of study, and finally they shortlisted 3 cities. Now I remember this because Dallas was one of them, Chicago was one of them, and something else, I don't remember one of them. Finally, they chose Chicago. They chose Chicago, I believe, partly from the reason because there was more connectivity to outside world and travel from Chicago compared to Dallas. So, and also the skill set, that's very important. A lot of companies set up their shops near Austin because University of Austin produces a lot of graduates, and there is a lot. Amazon wanted to establish, so Amazon is also in Seattle. I think they were looking for cities to establish second and third headquarters, tertiary headquarters. And the interesting story is they chose New York or something like New York, but the people of New York opposed it and they could not open it. Then they went somewhere else for that. So all kinds of things influence what one needs to do. So analysis is only one part of it. As I said with technology is only one part of it. Solving a problem has a lot of other influences. Similarly, analysis is one part of it. Then there are a lot of other things, like a state may give you a lot of tax incentive, they give you a lot of land for free, for example, they will give you something else. All those things come into picture in the final decision. Tier 2 cities, small scale industries will benefit because of comparatively cheaper real estate, decent population and manpower, good places to host event helps. Proposed heuristics effectively generate the above set of house by cutting down on both time and storage space required. Okay, I think we are at the end. I thought there was one more prediction. I don't know what happened to this. We did not address this one. This one. We did this, actually we did this for the Frontier Airlines, if I remember correctly. I don't know why the slides are not there. So we predicted a particular city from the list of Frontier Airlines, and it turned out that a year later, Frontier actually announced that city to be the city they wanted to expand next. So kind of what we did for our prediction turned out to be pretty decent and pretty correct in what they wanted to do. So when you do the analysis, it's important to make sure that your analysis is correct, your analysis is valid, and it has sound theoretical underpinnings. It is not something, it's not a rabbit pulled out of a hat. Okay, so let me stop here for today, and when we come back, we will look at, actually I have a lot of slides for the next, convey MapReduce in 1 hour. Usually I take 2 weeks to do this in my course, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Now here I am short of time, there is only 1 hour. I'll see how much I can do. So, how many of you have heard of MapReduce? One? Only one person? Wow. Okay, how many of you have heard of Spark? 0%. 1%. Okay. Oh, ma'am is here, I don't know what it means. She's always here when she wants me to stop it. Is that correct?
Sir, I was thinking about your tiredness only.
Huh?
कि आप थक गए होगे. You might have tired, na?
That's an excuse. Give me 5 minutes and then
Sure.
we'll stop.
So I'll be there outside only.
Okay. So what is MapReduce? Why did it come about? Who sort of, I won't say discovered it, but who was the pioneer in bringing that to practice? So it's a programming paradigm, which is very different from what you already do. You know, you are familiar with imperative programming like Fortran, C++, Python, Java. You are also, some of you may be familiar with SQL, which is a different programming paradigm. SQL is not the same as a programming language, right? You don't write you write SQL queries, but they are not the same as programs. Now, this is still a third paradigm which is different from a programming language, which is different from SQL, but you still write it in a programming language. You can write it in C++, Java, Python, Scala, whatever language you are comfortable with. The important thing is it's a parallel programming paradigm. And for parallel programming, there are 2 models. One is a shared memory model. The other one is a shared nothing model. Now, MapReduce falls into the shared nothing category. It's very easy to program. It's very easy to program shared memory model. You can write threads, and the thread programming and the operating system is responsible for scheduling threads. But shared nothing module is much, much more complex, and MapReduce is one of them, so you have to think. It's derived from functional programming, specification versus procedural programming. So I don't know how many of you are and traditional parallel processing, and the answer is yes, there is a difference, and this is what we are going to look into. The second thing to understand is there are different kinds of parallelism that you need to understand. One is data parallelism, another one is task parallelism. So what is the difference? So data parallelism means concurrent execution of the same code on multiple computing nodes or cores. So remember, it's the same program that runs on multiple machines or multiple cores. So what does it mean? The program is the same, but the data is different. That's why it is called data parallel. So you feed different data to the same computation. Whereas typically on different check subsets of data, amount of parallelization can be based upon input size. So you can have 10 machines, you can have 100 machines, you can have 1000 machines. Load balancing can be done for optimizing this one, no communication among the computing nodes. This is very important to understand, which is different from traditional MPI based parallel programming. How many of you have heard of MPI? So programming using MPI is not easy. You have to determine what to communicate, when to communicate, with whom to communicate. Whereas here, you don't have to do that. Number of chunks or shards or splits need not be the same as the number of computing nodes. We can have 100 computing nodes, we can have 1000 chunks, still it will work. Second one is the task parallelism. So the difference is you are executing different tasks on the same data. In one case, data is different, code is same. Here, code is different, data is same. Same or different chunks of data. Amount of parallelization is proposed to the number of independent tasks. Does MapReduce use data parallelism or task parallelism? So here, because the tasks are different, you have to write multiple tasks. So the amount of parallelism will not be very high because you're not going to write 1000 different tasks. You may write 5 different tasks, 10 different tasks. MapReduce uses data parallelism. MapReduce was developed within Google as a mechanism for processing large amounts of raw data, like logs, like information generated in monitoring the machines. For example, crawl documents or web page. This is very heavily used for Google translation. Today, Google translation is pretty good. It will translate any language to any other language. For example, I was in China last year for 6 weeks teaching 2 courses. I don't know Chinese, but this translation is so good. You just point it to the Chinese, whatever it is, whether it's a name of the road, whether it's the name of the store, or something I want to buy, it will immediately translate. Had no problems in dealing with, and then some of them, when you express it, it will also give the voice output in the language, in the other language, so you can converse. Not only China, I went to Italy, and a lot of times when you go to smaller parts of Italy, I was in Naples, they were not speaking English. The guy from whom I rented the Airbnb was not speaking English. So I had to use the Google translation to talk to him. So today, life has become very easy with all the gadget and things, but somebody has to develop the algorithm, computation and all these things. So this data is so large, it must be distributed across thousands of machines in order to process in reasonable response time. Not 1, 200, thousands. The distribution implies parallel computing since the same computations are performed on each CPU with a different data set. MapReduce is an abstraction that allowed Google engineers to perform simple computations while hiding all the details of parallelization, data distribution, mobile. So this is the power of MapReduce because you don't have to worry about any of those things. Whereas in the earlier MPI way of doing it, you had to do everything yourself. And that is not easy, it takes a long time, there is a learning curve. This one is much easier. So let me stop here, otherwise she will walk in again and ask me to stop. So let me stop here and then continue when we come back after lunch. Thank you. Okay, let us start. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all awake and alert. Okay, so we are discussing MapReduce. So this was started within Google as a way to process very large amounts of raw data. This data is so large, it must be distributed across not a few machines, but thousands of machines. The distribution implies parallel computing since the same computations are performed. So you are doing the same computation, but you want to do it on large amounts of data, so you can piece it, partition it, and cut it into shreds and do it. MapReduce is an abstraction that allowed Google engineers to perform simple computations while hiding. So, as I said, this is important because earlier way of doing parallel processing required a lot of learning from the people who are involved. They tried to take most of that away from the end user. So, to summarize, MapReduce is a data parallel programming model that uses clusters of machines. Remember, we talked about grid computing and cluster computing in the cloud context. Most of the MapReduce work goes on in clouds. Pioneered by Google, at some point they were able to process 20 petabytes of data per day, popularized by, so even though surprisingly Google developed this MapReduce, the publicly available version today was developed by Yahoo. So we call it Hadoop. So it is developed by Yahoo and it's publicly, Google for some reason did not want to make their system available for public. So what do people use MapReduce for? At Google, they use it for index building, article clustering for Google News, statistical machine translation. At Yahoo, same thing. Index building is a very data intensive job because just imagine what is index building. These crawlers collect words from every web page, then do the stop words and other things, and then they index them. That's why when you give a bunch of words, they take all the web pages for each word and do an intersection of the web pages and give you the one that has all the words. At Facebook, it's used for data mining, ad optimization, spam detection. But what I have put in the sidebar is very important. Note that most or all of these applications are quite different from the traditional DBMS application. So they are not the same. Very large data sizes, very importantly, one-time computation. That means in a DBMS, you are asking the same queries every often. So if you are doing a employee management or payroll management or student management, you are asking the same queries. Here it is not. You do the log analysis once, then the new data set comes. You do the same analysis on the new data set. Then another data set comes. So you don't do the same analysis on the same data set. Versus data storage and management. So the main difference between database management systems and MapReduce is one is customized or tailored for data storage and management, whereas in MapReduce, data storage is there for intermediate computation, but there is no data management per se. You're not asking queries. You're writing a program to compute something. In that way, this may be similar to the traditional mining of doing one thing. SQL is not a good vehicle for doing this kind of task. Defining schema and loading this data into DBMS. So imagine if you have to load large amounts of data and do only one-time computation, again load another set of data and then do a computation, it's a waste of time and resources. So this model is very different from that. So what you have to understand is it is not MapReduce or DBMS. You can have both. Each one is used for a different purpose. So it's not one or the other. That's important to understand. And more importantly, if you want to use a DBMS, you have to define a schema. You have to load the data. and then you have to ask queries and generate reports. Here, there is no need to define the schema. There is no schema. Whatever format that you give that data in, your program will understand and take care of it. So schema creation and loading the data is a complex process. If you do that, you want to amortize that over a very long period of time. You don't want to do it for one execution or one query. So that's very important to understand. It's also used for graph mining. We are doing it. It is used for page rank calculation, machine learning algorithms. Today, almost all machine learning algorithms have been translated to MapReduce version to make it faster, response time, shortest path. Problems are being ported to MapReduce on a daily basis. It's a very popular research area, and porting algorithms into map is not always straightforward. So this is where the challenge is. It is not that you can take an algorithm and just convert it into MapReduce. There is a lot of design that goes into it. Sometimes the algorithms are somewhat different from what you are doing. In research, Wikipedia conflicts are being analyzed using this. Natural language processing are being done. Bioinformatics, astronomical image analysis, ocean climate simulation. We are using it for graph mining. We are using it for multi-layer network analysis. We'll see that in the next lecture. So, MapReduce design goals are scalability. That's one of the things we wanted to emphasize in this course is, why do we need scalability and who can give you the scalability that you want given the sizes of the data. So large volumes, hence focus on data parallelism. I mean, these are just numbers, scan. If you have 100 terabytes of data, if you use one node at 50 megabytes per second, it takes 23 days to process it. The same data can be processed on a 1000 node cluster in 33 minutes. This is what scalability gives you. It doesn't change the amount of computation you need to do. You still need to do the same amount of computation, right? Because the data size is large, but you are doing it in parallel. That reduces the response time. So understand clearly the purpose of parallel processing is not for reducing the amount of work, but for reducing the total time it takes to do the job. It is the same principle as if one person is working on a project and you put 4 more people, you may be able to finish it faster. But still, everything has to be done. Cost efficiency. This is where the commodity nodes come into picture that I spoke about. These are cheap, but they are not reliable. Commodity disks. So these are CPUs, cheap, and RAID makes them reliable. So that's very important to understand. Commodity network. So on the incorporated automatic fault tolerance, meaning fewer administrators, easy to use, fewer programmers. So these are the highlights or design goals. So MapReduce does automatic parallelization and distribution of data. It also supports fault tolerance, but the kind of fault tolerance supported by MapReduce is somewhat different from what a DBMS does, recovery. Provides status and monitoring tools. It's a clean abstraction for programmers, borrows from functional programming. Users implement 2 functions, only 2 functions. That is what makes it very attractive and useful. So what are those 2 functions? One is called the map function. The other one is called the reduce function. That's where the name comes from. And the map function, this is important to understand, takes in an input value. So every input to MapReduce map program should be in the form of a key and a value. The value can be anything, the key can be anything. The value can be as big as you want, it can be an entire object, and the key can also be null. And it takes one key and the associated value and converts it into maybe a different key called the intermediate key and a list of values. So this is also important to understand that a single input may be converted into one or more outputs. Now, this output is fed into the reduce program. Intermediate key and intermediate value list, and then this reduce program produces the final output in the form of the output key and output value list. That's it. That's what MapReduce is. Now you know everything about MapReduce. Just write the map function, write the reduce function. Input key, intermediate key and out key need not be the same. They can be very different or they can be the same. So in a nutshell, the end user writes only two functions or two methods. All other things that happens in between are managed by the underlying framework. Any questions? So just to give you an idea, this is what a server forms look like. It may contain servers up to 10,000 servers and more. I was in Sweden a couple of years ago, in the northern part of Sweden, and my host told me that there is a Facebook server farm 50 miles north of that place. So we were driving to see something and we went there. So this was a server farm by Facebook that was fenced. It was 1 kilometer by 1.2 kilometers. And there was a huge building which contained, I don't know how many servers, maybe 100,000 servers. So my question to you is, why does Facebook go all the way to Sweden to set up a server farm? Is there a reason? Anybody?
Temperature. Temperature.
Temperature, exactly. So when you have CPUs, they generate a lot of heat. When you have 10,000 CPUs, 100,000 CPUs, they generate a lot of heat. They need a lot of air conditioning. But in the northern part of Sweden, it is cold most of the times. They don't have to spend any money for air conditioning. There is natural air conditioning, they just have to let the air in. That's all they have to do. So most of these people go and set up these huge server farms that generate a lot of heat in cold climates because they save a lot on the electricity and the air conditioning. So if you want to understand MapReduce, now I've been teaching this course for a long time and I have sort of revised and changed slides many a times. So you need to understand it at 3 levels. You need to understand it at job level, and then we'll see the other two. So what is job level MapReduce? You have to configure a MapReduce job to run it on desired number of mappers and reducers. So when you create a job, not the program, when you create a job, you need to say how many mappers do you want to use, how many reducers you want to use for this particular job. Now this is purely up to you. You may use 10 CPUs, you may use 100 TPUs, you may use, but the cost varies. Remember the rental model, pay-per-use model? Because of that, the more resources you want to use, the more you have to pay. It depends upon your affordability and what kind of response time you want. Also, you have to provide something called block size for sharding. I'll come to that. Then you have to understand or decide whether you have a single input file or whether you have multiple input files. Because if you have a single input file, then you write one map program for that file format. If you have 3 input files, the formats may be different, so you may have to write 3 map jobs. But each map job can run on any number of processors. So first file can be sharded and processed on 10 processors, second file may be processed on 100 processors, third file may be processed on 50 processors. So you have to determine the total number of mappers and how many mappers you are going to use for each input. Decides number of mappers methods to write. So this determines how many mapper methods you have to write. Unless the files are identical, then you don't need multiple inputs, right? You can just combine them and use the same thing. Whether a single job or you need to use chained multiple jobs. In this jargon, a single job means one set of mappers and one set of reducers. Together make up a job. So a job is map, reduce, pair. Any number of mappers, any number of reducers, you decide. But some of the problems cannot be solved with one map, reduce, pair. You may need a second pair, you may need a third pair. So you need to decide that. That is called chaining. So you feed the output of the first job into the second job. You feed the output of the second job into the third job and so on. So that's what is called. So data flows from one job to the other. The other one is whether it's an iterative algorithm or a one-shot algorithm. If it is an iterative algorithm, then you may have 2 jobs. The output of that goes back to the first job, keeps doing it till a stopping condition. So iteration is different from chaining. They are not the same, but you need to understand what category your algorithm belongs. It can be just a straightforward chained algorithm, or it can be an iterative. So many algorithms like PageRank, graph mining that we do are iterative algorithms. Other issues such as reading other files in the mapper or reducer is reported. Many times in addition to the input file, you may need other auxiliary files that are used by the mapper and sometimes by the reducer, so you have to make sure you provide that. So this is what I call understanding of things at the job level, so higher level. Then you need to understand things at the map reduce level, map function level and the reduce function level. What are they? The code that you write and its understanding as well as conformity with the paradigm. So you have to write some code. So you have to write map code, you have to write reduce code. So you have to understand how you should write it with respect to the input and the pattern. So the mapper code consists of one or more based upon the number of inputs. It has a setup part, main part and cleanup part. In the setup part, you do things like initialization, reading files, setting up instrumentation, creating data structures used during the main part. Main part is the actual main function that you write, code for your application, and then your cleanup part is to writing additional files, instrumentation, etc. So every map function can have these 3 parts, but setup part and cleanup part are optional. You may not need that depending upon your algorithm. You may just have the main part. Same for the reducer code. You have a setup part, main part and a cleanup part. There is something called a combiner. It's optional. If you want, you can write a combiner, and this combiner will be executed after the map method is executed. So combiner will always be executed after the map task. Writing intermediate results and computation if any between it. So if you are chaining or if you are doing iteration, you may want to do some additional computation like merging files and other things in between 2 jobs. That you have to do separately outside of the MapReduce framework. You have these files. Then you can do whatever you want with that, and then you feed it into the next batch job map reducer. So is this clear what you nearly do? Then there is the framework. So job level, map reduce level, framework level. So what is the framework level? Here, a lot of things are done by the framework and it is transparent to the user. That means the user does not have to write any code for that. But you have to understand it. You have to understand what the framework does. Because if you don't understand what the framework does, you won't be able to write your mapper code or your reducer code. So first thing you have to understand is how are shards created and splits handled by Hadoop. So what is the meaning of a shard or a split and who creates it and how it is handled. How are multiple mapper nodes used for the same input? So if you have multiple mapper nodes, how it is used. Feeding input to the mapper node, one key value at a time. It's always one key and one value at a time. You cannot feed more than one key and more than one value to the mapper at the same time. Because you don't do the feeding, the framework does the feeding. And it will always feed one key and one value. Processing at the end of the mapper code on the mapper output. So framework does a bunch of processing after the map method is run on the output of the mapper. So you need to understand what it does, how it does, and why it does. Processing at the end of the combiner code, if there is one. So at the end of mapper, there is something that happens. If there is a combiner, something happens at the end of the combiner. Partitioning and who does it. So there is this notion of partitioning. This partitioning is different from shards or splits. So they use a different word not to confuse one with each other. We use partitioning very loosely many a times, but here data split is different from the partition done by the framework, and there is a difference between them. Why is sorting and grouping needed and who does it? What is shuffle? There is a process called shuffle. Principle behind the shuffle includes exchange of data between mappers and reducers. So shuffle name came from this. So once all the mappers finish their task, the output of the mappers need to be sent to the reducers. And then reducers do the second part of the job, and then you get the output or fed into the next job. Now you need to understand how this transfer of data from mapper output to reducer input takes place. That's a very complex process that involves sorting, that involves merging, that involves partitioning, and then shuffling, meaning each mapper sends it to different reducers. Which partitions from the mapper are sent to which reducer? Understand the difference between a mapper task and a mapper node. So this is also important to understand. A mapper node is a physical resource, like a CPU or a core. A mapper task is a logical computation. So you always run a logical computation on a physical resource. You may have more logical computations, less number of physical resources, then you do it sequentially. So if I have 4 nodes and 8 splits of data, I can only run 4 at a time. So I run the first 4. When they are finished, I run the next 4 on the same nodes. It takes more time, less parallelism, but it costs less. Each mapper task runs on a mapper node, process or resource. So understand the difference between a task and a node, a resource and a logical execution of a task. Any questions? Without clearly understanding all the three levels, I think you will not be able to write meaningful MapReduce algorithms, much less code. Again, I have to make a distinction that it is useful to write algorithm first and then translate that into implementation. What I see many times our students do is, when I ask them to solve a problem, they start coding it directly. And then I ask them, do you have an algorithm? No, sir, I will develop the algorithm as I code. So this is a very standard technique used by most of you, and that is a very bad practice. You cannot write a code if you don't know what you are writing the code for. You cannot just develop the algorithm on the fly unless it is a very basic algorithm. Add 10 numbers, of course you can write the code. But compute a prime number, you cannot write a code directly because you don't know the algorithm for identifying a prime number. First you need to figure out the algorithm and then code. So a lot of students waste a lot of time writing code, and then it doesn't give the answer they want, then they go and change the code. So they do what I call exhaustive programming. Not extreme programming, exhaustive programming. That means trial and error. Change this, see whether you get the result, change something else. To me, this is more like a lot of monkeys using a typewriter and generating Shakespearean play. That is never going to happen. So don't write your code till you have an algorithm that you have verified, that is correct, that you have tested. Then the total time taken will become very less. The fact that many machine algorithms have been successfully translated to this is indicative of its utility and capability. Although paradigm seems very simple, user written code is typically not very big. Considerable amount of heavy lifting is done by the underlying framework, hence need to understand it, freeing the user to focus on the problem. So you need to focus on your problem, not other things. So, a little more detail. Input is a set of key value pairs, KV, K can be null. When I say a set, it's a list of sequence. It can be whatever size. You may feed 100,000 key value pairs, 1 million key value pairs, or 10 million key value pairs. It doesn't matter. User supplies two functions, as I said, map function, which generates some output, converted into something, and then reduce function takes that, generates the output. If you want to understand it pictorially, this is how it happens. So you have an input file. We have a very large input file. Let us say you have an input file that is 200 gigabytes. Now, you shard this file into input split. So you can say 200 gigabytes, let me split it into 500 megabytes. So I don't know, you may generate 40 splits. So you're going to process each split individually. So you have parallelized it, if you want, in 40 possible ways, but depending upon how many mapper nodes you choose. So if you have 40 splits, 40 mapper nodes, it gives you maximum parallelism. If you have 40 splits, 20 mapper nodes, then you have to, each mapper node has to process 2 splits sequentially. So these input splits, each input split is fed into a mapper task. Remember, I'm not saying mapper node because mapper tasks run on mapper nodes. And they convert map KV to K prime V prime, where V prime is a list. And then the magic happens here. This is what we call shuffling. And in this, it does a lot of things. Part of shuffling happens in the mapper, part of shuffling happens in the reducer. In the process, it does sorting, it does grouping, and it does partitioning. And once all of it is done, then it goes to the reducer. It goes to the reducer node, and then output file you get. So this is what happens. So number of mapper tasks depends upon the number of input splits. Number of mapper nodes is user defined. And the system will make sure all the splits are run on the number of mapper nodes you give. If you use one mapper node, then it becomes a single CPU processing. That means all the splits have to be processed by the same mapper node sequentially, then the response time will be very long. So how do you handle data in Hadoop? It uses a special file system called HDFS. This is Hadoop Distributed File System, which is different from network file system. You guys may be familiar with network file system. Network file system is used to access data over the network. Now, although every CPU, every commodity unit has its own local disk, you can also access data from some other disk that is visible to you using the network file system. So you can ask for data on some other machine to do that, but Hadoop developed its own thing for some reason. I'm going to sort of skip some of these things because I have a lot of stuff to cover. So what is Hadoop Distributed File System? Files are split into either 64 megabyte blocks or 128 megabyte blocks by default. But you can also specify the size. You can say, I don't want 128 megabytes, I want 500 megabytes. And that's fine. So every parameter that is used in Mapper can be customized by the user at the job level. And blocks are replicated on at least 3 different nodes. Here we have shown 4. 3 nodes are common. Single name node is used to store the metadata. This node knows which are the machines or the places where the data is stored and how they are stored, whether it's RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 2, RAID 3. So if one of these things fail, then the data is reconstructed from the others and the processing continues. Single name node metadata files names block. Data is stored on multiple data nodes, optimized for very large file sizes, sequential reads, because you're reading chunks of data and feeding it. So remember, even though we say it is split, the physical file does not actually get split. What the split is to say, this split starts from this byte to this byte, next split starts from this byte to this byte. So if you say read or take split 5 and do it, then it knows where to read from, where to end and process. So physically, the files are not split. HDFS can store large amounts of data, gigabytes to terabytes to petabytes, is spread over several machines, much larger file sizes than NSF. It stores data reliably using RAID. If individual machines fail, data is still available. It provides fast, scalable access to this information, and streaming access integrates well with Hadoop MapReduce, allowing data to be read and computed upon locally when possible. HDFS is not a general purpose NFS. Performance is good, some of these are not very relevant. So the entire Hadoop system is implemented in Java, including HDFS and so on. So it uses TCP/IP and RPC underneath. So let me see. So input files and charts. Application input file need to be on HDFS. So first thing you need to do is to load your file, however large it is, onto where you are running your Hadoop or a Hadoop system. Mostly it's a cloud, so you have to upload it into the cloud to do that. Input file assume it to be very large. A block size can be provided to shard the input file. So once you provide the block size, Hadoop system will automatically split it into whatever number of chunks it becomes. A default block size will be used if none provided. The input file is sharded based on the block size. User can control the number of shards by changing the block size. Based on resource used and affordability, each shard is considered an input split. Each input split is processed by a mapper task. Each input split is processed by a mapper task which runs on a mapper node. Number of mappers as well as reducer nodes can be specified by the user for each job. So if you have multiple jobs, job 1, job 2, job 3, you can specify the number of mappers for job 1, reducers for job 1, number of mappers for job 2, reducers, so on and so forth. File is not split. As I said, splits are calculated and stored in the name node. Offsets are calculated and stored. So this is the overall architecture of a map reduce. So there is a master node. This is very important. User program is sent to the master node. Master node determines and controls everything else from that point onwards. Master node is responsible for allocating the mapper nodes. So if you have indicated 3 mapper nodes, it will allocate 3 physical resources or CPUs for executing the mapper tasks. Now if the number of splits are more than 3, you can see that this map node processes split 0 and split 3, whereas this processes split 1 and split 2. So that's how it determines how to process all the splits with the given number of mapper nodes. Okay? Once the mapper nodes compute, they write their output to a local disk. These are local disks. Then the map master allocates the number of reduce nodes. Now remember, number of reduced nodes need not be same as the number of mapper nodes. And then it also tells these reducer nodes which data to take from where. And then the reduced nodes take that data, do their work, and then write the output. So this is at a very high level. So this is what happens. Now this does not show what happens in between mappers and reducers. It assumes that all of that happens and the reduce nodes will automatically somehow know where to get the data from and what to do. So this is how it is. Now this master node is the one in control. So it keeps pinging these nodes periodically. It uses a timeout mechanism. If a worker node does not respond for some amount of time, it assumes that this node has failed and it allocates a different node and then asks it to recompute for that split. So this is how fault tolerance is done. So the master node is responsible for making sure that individual node failures will not affect the computation that you are doing. Same thing for the reduced nodes. It will do the same thing. So map node failures and reduced node failures will not affect the completion of the job. The only time a job completion can be affected is when. When can happen in this scenario? Anybody? What happens if the master node fails? If the master node fails, then that job cannot be completed. Because master node is the one that is responsible for the execution of the job. If that itself fails, then there is nobody to recover that. So then it indicates to the user that this job has to be restarted. So there is a failure, single point of failure, only for the master nodes. All other points of failures are considered. Disk failures are taken into account. Mapper node failures are taken into account. Reducer node failures are taken into account. But there are no multiple masters. There is only a single master in the Hadoop environment. So keep that in mind. So job execution, the master initializes the data and splits it as specified or based upon the given or default block size. Sends each worker its partition or split task. Receives the results from each worker. When we say receives, it doesn't get it physically. It gets its location, where it is stored, and some meta information. Then the worker nodes receives partially split, actually its location from the master, perform the processing and notify the master when completed. So that's how the processing takes place. So master node controls the execution of all the splits by the master nodes. When it is done, it initiates the reducer nodes, and then once it is done, it completes. So, but all this happens behind the scenes. The user does not have to worry about this. Coordination, master data structures, it pings for idle, in progress or completed. Idle tasks get scheduled as workers become available. When a map task completes, it sends the master location and size of its or intermediate files, one for each reducer. So remember, number of mapper nodes is different from number of reducer nodes. If there are R reducer nodes, minimum is 1, maximum can be whatever you want. It creates R intermediate files, one for each reducer. Master pushes this into the reducers. Master pings workers periodically to test failures. It uses what is called a static load balancer. That means it doesn't take the dynamics of the network and other things into account. So clarity on MapReduce. User can specify the number of splits. We said that. Independently, number of mapper nodes can be specified. A node corresponds to a processor and a task is run on a processor. Number of reducers can be specified independently. Hadoop will create R partitions, output for mappers and send them to them. Number of mappers and reducers can be determined independently, but it is usually not arbitrary or a head-up. So the user should determine how many mappers do I need for this job? How many reducers I need for this job? It is not that everything, I mean, you wish that all of this is done automatically by the system, but there is no way that it can know. Number of mappers and reducers can be, but they are determined based on the amount of computation to be done and dividing the computation among the mappers, or for experiments to understand. So how do we do that? So suppose say the mapper, for each key value, suppose it generates 10 outputs. Then the output size increases by 10-fold at the end of the mapper processor. Then it does a lot of other things. Now you have to take that into account to see how many reducers you need to process it. Or if the mapper does not blow up the output space, then you don't need many mappers. Or if the mapper reduces the output space, then so you need to know, because you are writing the map program. You know what it does. Hadoop system cannot know what it does. For it, it's a program. So this is what happens. You have the large amount of input data. Node 1 gets a slice, node 2 gets a slice, node 3 gets a slice. What happens in the mapper? Map code method takes an input key value pair and generates 0 or more. Mapper processes one key value pair at a time. Does not. This is important to understand. There is a circular buffer in the mapper. So when it outputs, so remember we are dealing with very large data sizes, and the assumption is all of the input or all of the output cannot be stored in memory. If we can store everything in memory, we don't have a problem. We don't need parallel processing. We can just load everything into memory and run it. So this circular buffer in the mapper, when it reaches a threshold percentage, 80%, it is put into a disk. Each spill is partitioned and a group by is done on that, and all values for the same key are grouped. All values for the same key are merged, creating a value list. Number of partitions is equal to the number of reducers specified defaultly. This is done for each spill, as there can be many spills by a mapper task. Each spill corresponds to a buffer size. At this point, the mapper has n partitions for each spill, and then it does the same thing for all of them. So, I wish I had more time to explain this a little bit better, and also usually I go through a concrete problem and show how to solve problems, but unfortunately in this course we don't have that time. In fact, MapReduce itself can be a course for 1 week if you really want to understand all the details. Map method function written by the user is executed by each instantiation of mapper task. All the key value pairs output by the mapper are partitioned, sorted. So this is what happens in the transparent phase by the framework. So you don't have to, because sorting is not easy, especially sorting on the disk is complicated, grouping is not easy, and then merging is not easy, partitioning is also not easy, but all of it is done by the system. As I said, if you have a combiner method written by the user, it can be executed after the map function. The output of combiner is merged to a set of key value list, and this value list is what is sent to the reducer. So mappers are separate, reducers are separate. There is a network that connects them, and the shuffle sends data from all. Actually, it doesn't send the data physically. It tells the reducer, take data from here from the network. Each reducer processes its partition. Reducer always writes output to the HDFS, whereas the mapper does not write the output to the HDFS, but writes it to the local disk. So this is what happens in the mapping. As I said, each key value record is sent for processing separately, and this is this is the hello world equivalent of MapReducer programming. Here we are counting the number of characters, number of letters. In the input, how many A's are there, how many B's are there, how many C's are there. So these are 4 mapper nodes, let us say 4 splits. A first mapper produces this 1 A and 2 B's. Second mapper says, I have 3 C's and 6 C's. This one says this. Now if there is a combiner, it will merge these two. Here there is no merge. Here, since both are C's, 3 plus 6 is combined to 9. Here there is no merge, here there is no merge. Now this is partitioned, sorted, and you send to the reducer. There are 3 reducers, so A comes, every A from any mapper comes to this reducer, B comes to this one, so A from here comes to this one, A from here comes to this, so it becomes A15, B from here comes to this, C from here, C from here, C from here comes to this. So each reducer processes this one. Finally it outputs and says there are 6 A's, 9 B's, and 19 C's. So sorry for the hurried explanation. It does take more time to absorb this concept and to understand it clearly. So what happens in the mapper? If a combiner is provided, it's executed on partition. So I'll skip some of this because this is useful, but because I need to give at least. So this is what I said, partition sort. So here is the input split, here is the map task, here is the buffer, here are the spills, and this is where it creates partitions for each spill, and then it sorts and merges, and then it sends one partition to reducer 1, another partition to reducer 2, another partition to reducer C. Similarly, from other tasks, you get one partition to this reducer, another part. So this is what happens. So corresponding things from every mapper comes to the same reducer. Reducer 1, reducer 2, reducer 3, depending upon how many reducers are specified, and then the reducer knows what to do. Now the reducer runs your program, the program that you have written. What happens in the reducer? So shuffle sends, remember here, by the time it comes to the reducer, it's not key value, it is key value list. It's a set of values for that key. To each reducer from different mappers. How is that determined? This is based upon a reducer reads the same numbered partition from each mapper. Each reducer merges the value list of the same key, formulating a global key value list, and then it applies the reduce function also returned by the user. Acts upon. So remember, this is what you write, map code is what you write, everything else is done by the framework. This is what I said, transparent to the end user and happens as part of the framework. It operates on one key value list at a time and puts the output on the HDFS. So this is a little bit another picture showing the shuffle. So you can see that every mapper sends part of the information to reducer 1, part of the information to reducer 2, part of the same thing here. So this can be a complete graph. Think of mappers as nodes, reducers as nodes, and the connectivity as an edge. So this is a complete graph, exchange of information happens. Reducer, so the name reducer comes because it is doing aggregation. Mapper name comes because it is taking an input and mapping into one or more outputs. So it is mapping, reducer is reducing, which means it takes the entire value list and then reduce it to the proper output. Whatever function it wants to apply. If it wants to do the average, it can do the average. If it wants to do the max, it can do the max. It can compute the median. Whatever it is, it can apply. It can also do complicated things. So, I have a set of slides to test your understanding. I think I'm going to skip that because it is going to take a long time. So input output locations, input that you provide and final output are always stored on HDFS. Scheduler tries to schedule map tasks close to physical storage. So this is an optimization that is done by the Hadoop framework. Intermediate results are stored on the local storage. Scheduler also tries to schedule reducer tasks. So if the output of the mapper is stored in some node, the reducer node will be closer to it because data read will be faster. If it is very far away from this node, then it takes more time to read it. So there are local optimizations. Output of job is often input on a job. Not all problems are solved. So fault tolerance, I think I already discussed it. Map worker failure, it is restarted. Reducer failure, it is restarted. Master failure, map reduce task is aborted and client notified. How does this compare with recovery in DBMS? will not do that. So map invocations are distributed across multiple machines by automatically partitioning the input data into a set of splits or shards. The input shards can be processed in parallel on different machines. Each shard becomes a mapper shard. Each shard are split. One mapper processes one shard at a time. Number of mapper nodes need not be the same as the number of splits. Then multiple splits are processed on the same mapper node. Reduce invocations are distributed by partitioning the intermediate key space, groups using partition functions. Number of reducers can be specified. By writing your own partition function, you can do that. Now, there is an option in MapReduce to substitute everything it does as part of its transparent jobs by your own custom code. But you have to become an expert MapReduce programmer in order to avail those facilities and do those things. So I'll skip testing your understanding. I assume you have understood everything very clearly. You may want to just go over this if you want, because so overlap of shuffle. I think this is another concept that you should understand. So initially we said that all the map jobs should complete and then the reduced jobs will start, but that is not really true. Exchange can start before the map jobs are complete. So suppose say you have 10 splits, 5 splits are complete and the other 5 splits are being executed. Now the data from these 5 splits can be sent to the reducer. So by doing this, you are overlapping shuffle and map processing. Shuffle and some reduce processing, this will further improve the response time. So that is what this slide is saying. There can be overlap of shuffle. This process of moving map outputs to the reducer can overlap with other map tasks, what the reducer does transparently, and this is useful. I'll skip this. So we'll try to wrap this up in the next few minutes. So how does you as an end user program Hadoop? So it's you and there is the Hadoop cluster. So typically you access it over the network and you have to log into that system and then you get a login, you get some space, you have to upload things into that one and do that. So you first load your data into HDFS. So there are scripts for doing that and then you develop your code locally. So you can develop your code on your laptop. In fact, you can also install Hadoop on your laptop. There are Hadoop installation and then you can test your code on your laptop first. Once you are convinced it is running, because your laptop does not have a lot of resources. You cannot say I want 100 mapper nodes. But once you think it is running correctly, the output is correct, then you can even test it on a smaller amount of data as sanity check. When it is running, then you can give the full size data onto the cluster and do that. Then you submit your map reduce job. So you have to do the configuration for the job and then submit it, and then you go back to step 2 if the output is not what you are expecting, and then retrieve data. So this is an iterative process, just like you do any program, right? You write a program, you run some tests, the output is not fully correct, you make changes to your program, run it again and see whether it's correct. So you have a bunch of test cases to make sure your program. The same thing is true here. Only thing is here you are doing it with the cloud and this one not on your laptop. So this is just to show, I have already talked about it. So just a word on chaining. So chaining means you have one job, map one, reduce one, the output goes to map2 reduce 2, output goes to map3 reduce 3. Now this is done by something called the job conf object. So all of this, there are abstractions, there are interfaces in Java to write it. Nowadays you can also write it in Python, you can write it in C++. Almost every language is supported by Hadoop MapReduce. So chaining examples, some of these have to be done using chaining single source shortest problem, page rank, graph property. So the above problems cannot be done in one iteration. This means several MapReduce pages have to be chained to solve. So you may have a chain and they iterate. That's also possible. So let's come to the summary. Additional features such as pipes and streaming. So typically a Hadoop runs on a Linux environment. I don't know how many of you are comfortable or familiar with Linux environment. So that's what it typically does. If you want to install it on Windows machine, typically you install a WSL or a virtual machine, which is a Linux machine, and then you install on that. If you are familiar with C++ or Java, it is not very difficult to understand. Of course, if you want to use advanced features, then you have to learn. Much easier than using a DBMS for some jobs where the data is in free format, more of this. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. And tomorrow, we'll see an application of using MapReduce for substructure discovery, which has been done by one of my master's thesis students last semester. So we'll discuss that and then wrap it up. At least that will give you an idea of how to use MapReduce for a complex algorithm. Thank you very much. I will see you tomorrow. I think there's only 1 hour of lecture tomorrow, followed by break, followed by exam, and followed by something else. I don't know what it is. So ma'am is already here. I knew that. So I wanted to make sure before she comes, I'm done.